We're in the middle of Adventure Month here on the Retro Hour podcast, where all this month we're celebrating the art of point-and-click adventure games, the new amazing book from our good friends at Bitmap Books, and it's out right now. Now, we're going to tell you more about the book in the next 15 minutes, but check out our website, theretrohour.com, get a good look at it, and get your hands on a copy, either by winning it or buying it now. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 143, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
Welcome back, Handsome Joe.
Woo, woo, woo.
I know why Joe's back this week. It's because the Christmas quiz is coming up, isn't it, in a couple of months?
Yeah. He's got to get his practice in.
I've got to keep fresh, I've got to keep the knowledge going. And also, we will probably have like a gaming stream soon as well. So I just need to get back in there with you guys, really, just so I'm involved.
It has been so busy recently. I mean, I'm actually glad, I said this last week, to be coming in doing the podcast, have a break from house moving. I know you moved house in the last couple of years. I didn't realise how long it takes.
Yeah, it's a big deal, isn't it? You think, this will take a couple of months or whatever. Like, bam, all of a sudden, after 6 months, you're just there 2-3 weeks, just moving crap about.
Well, Dan, you kind of introduced yourself to the neighbourhood in a very innovative way.
Well, yeah, this happened last night. I was going out with a mate. I'd moved some stuff from my old flat, the last of my kind of old computers and stuff that I still had there.
The bric-a-brac.
Yeah, exactly. The last little bits. So there's a few CD-ROMs and an Acorn Electron that I had in a box in the back of my car. Took a few boxes out, got into my new house. And the internet had been fitted during the day. Virgin had been around. It started working. I was like, all right, got a bit distracted. Forgot about this box of games and this Acorn Electron I left out in the car park, essentially. So came out in my car in the dark, 7:30. Reversed the car, heard like a crunch. I said, what was that? I thought, must have been something in the boot. Drove off. My missus then texted me about an hour later saying the neighbour's just walked up to the door, said he's just drove over this computer. Does it belong to you? So I've got an Acorn Electron that's been driven over twice now. So.
And you had all retro goodness sprayed all over the street.
Dan's here.
There's a load of
retro games.
Load of CD-ROMs, a computer, and a book about disco music. So that was all left all over the road outside.
Were they quite, snotty about it as well? Like,
yeah, welcome to the neighbourhood. So things can only get better. But
look at that young ruffian.
I'll blame it on the tiredness.
With his high-tech Acorn computers.
Yeah, the guy must be like, what the hell? Who are these people? So anyway, we are here, and now that I've got my internet fitted, I'm going to be doing a live stream.
Excellent, because I did one last week, which was really good fun, Simon the Sorcerer.
Yeah, I love that game. So much fun.
It was great, and having Chris Barry doing all the Red Dwarf kind of jokes on there and stuff, it was excellent. We've
been doing these, this will be the third one coming up, because at the moment we're doing Adventure Month. Now, we're celebrating this amazing book, The Art of Point-and-Click Adventure Games by Bitmap Books. Get your hands on that, Joe.
It's very large. Like, just to give you an example, that's me just putting it down on the desk.
I was walking through town with it earlier and I was holding it and I kind of felt like a preacher. Well,
I don't know. I'd be worried that somebody might stop me and go, what are you doing with this weapon? It's very large.
Yeah, but you could have stood on the corner of the market square and just read out bits about Leisure Suit Larry.
Yeah.
Really good.
Absolutely.
So this book is it's a visual celebration of point-and-click adventure games and covering, the classics we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Stuff like Simon the Sorcerer is in there, Monkey Island, of course, Maniac Mansion, even stuff like Myst in there as well, The Dig, Discworld, Blade Runner. Of course, we had an episode all about that with Lewis Castle last week. So we are bringing you some of the contributors to the book on the podcast and also giving you a chance to win a copy of this book as well. Or if you'd like to help out the podcast, we'd have a little link that you can use to buy your own copy of it. A lot of people have been actually tweeting in and leaving comments on Facebook saying, as soon as I heard it, I've gone out and bought the book and sending us pictures of them with the book.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And today's guest is absolutely awesome. We've got Paul Conway and he's featured in the book and he's done a new point-and-click retro-style game, which is called The Darkside Detective, and he's just had a Kickstarter as well, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and he's actually worked on over 100 games, even going back to stuff like The Sims and Theme Park as well. Really interesting guy. And yeah, what he's going to be talking about, this week, it's kind of going to be like the rebirth of point-and-click adventure games we're going to kind of look at. Stuff like Thimbleweed Park we've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and some interesting angles about it as well. Are people getting retro fatigue?
Yeah, 'cause he's a pixel artist as well as like 3D and that kind of stuff. So the game, The Darkside Detective, number 2 is actually on Kickstarter right now. It's been funded, but the Kickstarter finishes today at the time the show goes out. So you could just get in there if you listen nice and early in the morning. But he's going to be our special guest. Paul Conway will be coming up on the Retro Hour podcast in around 20 minutes from now. Now, this weekend, I think I'm going to play Monkey Island.
Oh, yes, Monkey Island's great.
I can't decide, though. Do I do the special edition with the talking or the original?
I don't know. I like the talking one because basically the talkie guy just did a lot of action and I just sat there and drank tea.
Yeah.
But the original one, you could get more into it and do a bit more commentary. It's up to you, I guess.
You had to do the voices when you did Police Quest, though, didn't you, and all the accents?
Yeah, I had to read it and do all the voices, and that was bad.
So I'm going to be doing that. It'll be actually the first stream I've done from my new place, so I hope my internet holds up. That'll be on Sunday night at 6 o'clock. We'll be doing that on Facebook, on YouTube, Twitter.
Yeah, Periscope on Twitter as well.
Yes, I'll make sure all of those are in the show notes at theretrohour.com. And our website is the same place that you need to go if you'd like to buy a copy of the Art of Point and Click Adventure Games book. You'll be really helping out the podcast if you use our link. And also while you're there as well, you can enter our competition to win your own copy of the book. Now, we've been doing a draw every week throughout Adventure Month. And well done this week, Ashley Kingston. You are this week's winner. So a copy of the book will be in the post for you over the next couple of weeks. And we have got a new round of the competition running right now. So if you'd like to win this week's, all you got to do is leave your details at theretrohour.com. You're getting a bit distracted by the book there, Joe.
I was massively. I was going through it. I literally it was weird. I opened it straight onto Discworld, and I was like, "Oh, I love Discworld." And then you mentioned Discworld like the instant I opened it, and then I was going through it, and then I was very pleased to see that it's got information about the Walking Dead Telltale game in here, which I've always considered a point-and-click game, and some people say it isn't. So
there you go.
There we go. I feel quite smug.
And it's in the book.
And last week I mentioned that there wasn't too old a Discworld games. There was. Glenn Corpus actually corrected me, so cheers for that.
All right, we've had on the show before.
Yeah,
go Glenn. Now, also, if you'd like to support this podcast, another way that you can do that, I mean, there are lots of ways. You could leave us a nice review on your favourite podcast service, give us a little thumbs up, a little 5-star rating, that always helps. Or you could even help us out with the running of the show. Now, we do have a little tip jar on the front page of theretrohour.com for making a little donation in there, any amount. You will find your place in, by far, the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. Just like this week,
Roman Chispat,
Scott Fairclough,
Joshua Malone,
and Timothy Mellard.
And you can do the same. All you got to do is nip onto our website to leave a little tip and help us continue into our 3rd year of the Retro Hour podcast very soon. Can't believe that's crazy, isn't it? You'll find it all on the front page of theretrohour.com. Now, thinking back to the early days of this show, we did have a guest who was one of our favourite guests that we've ever had on the podcast.
He's the only guest that we've actually got on the news section as well, because he was so good fun and such a nice bloke.
Now, we're talking about Ben Daglish, very famous Commodore 64 and Amiga musician, worked on many platforms, and we invited him on the show because we've both been big fans of his music for many years. And turns out he actually lived quite locally to us, didn't he?
Yeah, he lived in Matlock, which was a little bit of a drive away, to be fair. But, he actually came out and met us on a snowy day. It was fantastic.
Yeah, he drove here in, blizzard condition snow. It was really, really cold that day. And he came in and he wanted to support. I mean, you've got to remember this was episode 17? And I think then we got 1,000 listeners to that episode. Yeah. We were like, wow, that's loads. You know what I mean? It was like... And he really did support this show by, not only giving his time up, but coming in. And like you said, he hung around and actually did the news section with us as well. If you just want to be involved and show a bit of support to us. So we've always really appreciated Ben for that. But it was very sad to read that last week, actually, Ben passed away.
Yeah, we actually found out as we came back from recording the episode. So a lot of people were like, why haven't you mentioned it? And we wanted to do a proper tribute to him because, he's worked on amazing games like Last Ninja and Deflector. And, some of his music's just amazing, and people that have worked with him and the tributes have been great. So Mark Knight, TDK, who we've had on the show before, he played a lot with Ben. So they actually had Mark Knight perform at Revision, which is the big demo party this year, and he's done a tribute to Ben Daglish, and we're going to have that on the show notes. But also, we had Chris Abbott on recently, who ran C64 Audio, and they're doing that big symphony as well. They've actually released a tribute album called Sid Effects 2 that's all free to download, and that's lots of Ben's music, and it's in MP3 and FLAC format as well. You can download that for free. Yeah. So, very sad news. Rest in peace, Ben. What a legend. Just the outpouring of love for him on Facebook and Twitter and everything I've seen over the last week's been incredible as well. Yeah, it just proves how much of a good guy he was. Absolutely. So if you want to download those and a little tribute to Ben Daglish, and maybe even check out the episode we did with him as well, because he was such a fun guy, I'll put all that in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, Blockbuster. There's a
brand that we don't see on the high street anymore.
Yeah, Blockbuster. They were doing something very interesting. There's a nice article on Hackaday. And have you guys heard of New Leaf Entertainment?
Yeah, it does ring a bell.
So is New Leaf Entertainment, is that the company that were kind of behind this, like in partnership with Blockbuster?
Yeah, so what this was, it was a scheme, and the scheme was basically, during launches and stuff, they would only have a limited supply of, like, Mortal Kombat carts or something like that. So this was a way that Blockbuster could come.
So we're talking, like, early 90s kind of.
Early 90s, but it went up to the PlayStation period.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they were doing CD-ROMs and everything, but Blockbuster had a way of copying its own kind of titles, and they would flash EEPROMs, and they'd be on these little carts, and it was actually under the brand Game Factory.
Yeah, so Ravi was telling me about it earlier on, and I was like, that rings a bell, and I'm sure I've seen the YouTuber, The Gaming Historian, cover these before. So essentially... So what were Blockbuster doing? They were copying games and burning them onto cartridges
well, it
with
was
their own technology.
Yeah, it was a full system. So first they'd have like a centre that you could go and you could look at the display unit and see the game, like 30 seconds of game footage or something like that.
Actually see it working. This is legit, guys. It works.
and then they'd kind of print the cartridges if they ran out, or you know, they'd also print DVDs off with 4 times speed CD burners. Cutting edge technology there.
It essentially meant they were never out of stock of a title that you might want to rent, essentially. It's a pretty good idea, I guess.
That's pretty smart. If I remember rightly, there's 2 versions. There's the green one and then either the blue or yellow one. I'm not too sure. And one had more memory than the other, depending on the size of the Mega Drive game.
And that's it. And they say, you know, there was a Nintendo equivalent of this as well that ran in Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the problem was when stuff like the virtual fighter and the stuff that needed the FX chip, you know, the Super FX chip, they couldn't recreate that. So.
No. Well, it doesn't even work now if you've got like, like an EverDrive with a flash cart. A lot of that, I think maybe the more modern ones have that emulation built in. But yeah, a lot of them, because you haven't got the Super FX chip, you couldn't run stuff like Star Fox and that. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of like they've described it here as like the 1 hour photo of physical media, which I guess it kind of was. Pretty cool idea. I mean, today we do take it for granted that because everything's digital now, you forget how heartbreaking it was to walk into like a video shop and want to rent that film and it wasn't there.
It wasn't there, yeah.
I mean, that was it. When the videos would be rented out, you know, there'd be a blank space, wouldn't there? So they had to fill it.
I mean, what's crazy is what it only takes, I'm reading it here, it only took 45 seconds, you know, on average to kind of get that game, to, you know, copy that game over, which really that's crazy for 1993. I'm reading here 45 seconds. Like, that's so quick for back then. I'm like, that's just blown my mind. Sorry.
I wonder how many of the Blockbuster employees there were at the back door, like, you know, here, give them copies to the mates.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that never happened.
Well, you know, there's been this whole thing about CEX photocopying manuals.
Yeah.
And stuff, and making their own CEX manuals and saying, the game includes a manual and it's just a photocopy. So, you know, they've been doing this kind of thing for years, these companies.
And to get that cart home, you're like, what the heck is this? Well, there's another cool little article that you found on Hackaday as well. Kind of, you know, continuing on from that, we're talking about Sega here. A device called the Sega Terra Drive. Now, I've never heard of this.
Yeah, so this was one of those, like, PC and Mega Drive combos.
Yeah, so Mega PC by Amstrad, I remember that one.
Yeah.
And that was essentially like a DOS/Windows PC that you had a little cover on the front, you'd slide it over, and there'd be a Mega Drive cartridge slot in there as well. You put a game in, and the monitor would change from the PC to the Mega Drive that was inside it. But this was actually a proper Sega product.
Yeah, it was released by Sega, and it was the dream machine, apparently. But they did a few mistakes. It was released in Japan, and it had a really cool feature, which was, it extended the video modes. So VGA and composite was supported as well. So you could probably get, like, VGA output on a Mega Drive, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then they released it, but they released it with, like, 286. And how old's the 286, Dennis?
God, 1982, I think it came out. So, like, a decade before this machine.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of put it behind because it was only at 10 megahertz.
Yeah.
So you can't really run much on that. Now, there's one of these in existence that people know about, and it's owned by a guy called Ronnie, and he's actually upgraded it to a 486 at 66 megahertz. So imagine you could probably play Doom alongside playing.
Get Doom on it. First things first.
We can get Quake and all that on there, I'd imagine, the 486. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So he's actually upgraded it, though. I mean, I imagine there will be a lot of people going, oh, it's the only one known in existence now. What are you doing messing around with it?
Yeah.
Well,
it also says
funny you should say that.
it,
When he said that it's the only one we know of and he's modded it, I started screaming like, whoa! Like, but then I was like, oh, I guess it's computer. Like, people do that a lot with kind of, but...
Well, it did get a general release in Japan, but apparently it was a massive flop. I mean, there might be more of them out there. But it's weird to think that probably a lot of them ended up in skips or just recycling plants or whatever. It's the amount of stuff you wish you kept.
Just part of Sega's weird and wonderful library of they've got the JVC Sega Mega Drives in America.
The Dreamcast Scuba TV.
Yeah. What was the other one? The Mega Drive, which was built into a karaoke machine in Japan as well. I forget what that's called, but it's just part of all that kind of weirdness.
We need one of those for this year's Christmas party, don't we?
Absolutely.
But yeah, Nintendo have kind of got I think we talked about it on the show a couple of years ago, actually, and there was a video where it kind of showed, I think it was Nintendo, have got a kind of a museum in their offices where they've got something of one of everything they've ever made.
Yeah.
And there's a little walk around. I wonder if Sega have got some kind of equivalent. You think they probably would have.
I don't know. Nintendo says real family friendly, we're really proud and nostalgic of the products we've made, and we really like to keep a hold of these things, this memorabilia. I can imagine Sega just being like, okay, chuck it in the bin. It just kind of gives that's just the kind of vibe I get from them sometimes.
I can also imagine the Virtual Boy being at the back gathering dust.
Yeah,
yeah. No one's playing on that
We'll
anymore.
put that one round the corner.
Yeah.
So if you want to read more about that, I'll put it in the show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, the Internet Archive is a site that we've covered quite a lot on this show in the past. We even had Jason Scott on, didn't we?
Yeah.
Talking about it. A really good place, especially now, because so many of the websites that hosted ROMs are going. I mean, I was having a chat to my mate at work, and he's quite into retro gaming. And he was saying the other day he wanted to get some Dreamcast games, and he couldn't find the ROMs anywhere, or the ISOs. He's looking all over, and he said,
I
they're all
know
been
places, but yeah.
And
there
dodgy
are a lot
rabbit wood.
going. Yeah, there's a few last bastions of hope. But I think the internet's changed as well to the point that you can play these games online in a window or in a browser. So there's no need to actually...
I'm playing Aliens as we speak.
No need to actually get the emulator. Now, what they've been doing at Internet Archive is they've been dumping absolutely huge collections of stuff, and they put all the Sega stuff up, didn't they? Or was it all the Nintendo?
Yeah. Didn't last long.
They got took down straight away, but this one's been up for a month, which is software library of the C64 with 8,878 titles in it.
So it's pretty much a full Commodore 64 collection.
Yeah, and it goes up to 2012, so it's got releases that were coming out then.
That's pretty cool. And you can play a lot of them in the browser.
All of them, I think,
That's nuts, isn't it? There goes productivity at work.
Yeah, I was just thinking then, I should probably send this to myself at work. But
Work email.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I think archive.org is such an important resource. It's a lot of this kind of stuff gets forgotten, and it's good that they do preserve it. And I think with, the Commodore 64 as well, the fact that a lot of the kind of companies that made those games probably don't exist anymore and no one really knows.
I think the C64's a bit more sorted in who owns the rights and stuff than Atari or Amiga or whatever's going on there, because the C64 Mini came out with loads of games already on there. There's been C64 emulators for years, hasn't there? So.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you can just play a lot of these games in browsers and stuff like that. I think, isn't there some website where, I can't remember which one it is now, where you can play retro games and it's kind of got a boss mode. So
really?
if it comes behind you, press a button on the keyboard and Excel pops up or something like this. So that's a pretty good idea. They should incorporate that on archive.org.
Yeah, you press spacebar 5 times in a row and it's just comes up. That'd be
Emergency
great.
mode, yeah. Well, one thing that I didn't ever think I'd see an archive of is something that I think it's fair to say we all hated back in the day, and that was banner ads.
Oh my God, my whole surfing through the early 2000s was just attacked by banner ads wherever you would go. And they'd also have sound on them as well, and oh God, it's horrible.
Yeah, and it'd be top of a website, normally made in Flash, weren't they, actually?
Yeah, but then pop-up windows were invented and suddenly it went mental.
Actually, it's more annoying a pop-up window, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you'd see them, rotating and the flash up in front of you, and some really weird ones as well. I mean, there's actually a guy who's took it upon himself, now that Flash has been discontinued, he thinks it's important to preserve this element of the internet. Some may argue.
This historic part of our history.
A specific part, which is online casinos and lower my bills ads. So, like, how to lower your bills.
I mean, this is quite interesting because I forget the name of the guy, but I recently read an article saying about how the guy who invented the pop-up ad, like, regrets it massively, and he is very sorry for inventing it. And then there's this dude here who's like, I want to preserve this part of the internet and make sure there's a website dedicated to it.
Well, there is a great podcast, actually, called the Internet History Podcast. I don't know if you've heard that. Some really good episodes. And actually, I think that he may be a guest on one of them a while ago. And he's talking about the process of like, we may as well do advertising on here.
Well, why are we talking about this? Because he says he kind of has a collection of lower bills ads, and he has about 600 of them, and they're from 2003 to 2004. But then he aims to collect Sonic the Hedgehog pop-ups and flash kind of advertising. Yeah.
Well, I guess there is, archives of every other kind of, you go on YouTube, you can watch our Sega TV ads and that kind of thing. So
maybe you could have like
part, isn't it? Like, I wonder if there's somebody out there with an archive of old adverts, TV adverts. Like...
Oh, absolutely is. Yeah.
They've got to make a like early 2000s browser that you can go on and just pop-ups come everywhere, and it's all full gifs.
Bonsai Buddy dancing in the corner, or Gator. Do you remember that? Oh, that used to be annoying. But actually, you mentioned adverts then, and when we've been moving house recently, I did find a big stack of old videotapes of like TV shows that I recorded like back in the mid-90s and early 2000s. And I thought, I won't throw them out. I'll try and get a video and like see what's on them. I mean, it might be
porn.
Vintage porn. But it would be, just seeing the old TV adverts might be pretty cool again. So, I mean, I guess you can become nostalgic for anything given time, I guess. Including early pop-up ads. So if you want to check those out at your leisure. Who'd have thought we'd voluntarily go onto our website and look at old pop-up ads? So we will put that in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Right, thank you for checking out the news this week. Of course, we are in the middle of the Retro Hour Adventure Month. Now, next week is going to be our final episode in Adventure Month. Hope you're enjoying it. Make sure you look out for my live stream. I'm going to be playing Monkey Island. I haven't played Monkey Island through for quite a while, so...
you're going to have to get some help, aren't you?
I might watch this and just watch you fail, like, so badly.
Yeah, no, you can have a walkthrough up on your machine and then send me some tips on Facebook Messenger. I look like I'm an expert, it'll be great. Yeah, but I might need your help, so if you'll watch out, going to be doing it around 6 p.m. This coming Sunday. We'll put links in our show notes along with everything else. And of course, while you're there as well, make sure you have a look at this book, The Art of Point-and-Click Adventure Games, from our friends at Bitmap Books. Nip onto our website, you can win or buy a copy on there, and it will be signed by the founder and creative director of the publisher Bitmap Books, Sam Dyer. So you'll find all of that on our website at theretrohour.com. Well, let's get into this week's guest, talking about the rebirth of point-and-click adventure games, making them in the 21st century, Paul Conway. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome this week's special guest as we continue Adventure Month on the Retro Hour podcast. Welcome to the show, Paul Conway.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
No problem at all, our pleasure. Now, before we talk about your titles like The Darkside Detective and the new one, Beyond the Dunes, let's get a bit of your background. I mean, do you kind of remember back to your earliest gaming memory? Where did it all begin?
My very, very first game was one of those like small like tabletop arcade machines for Defender, like little plastic toys, stick batteries in. You could play like a real bad version of Defender on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my sister got it for Christmas, not me. So I used to kind of get to look over her shoulders and look at her play it. And occasionally I was allowed on it for just a few minutes. Like back in the 80s, batteries are quite expensive. So, it was golden to actually have any time on it.
Were you more of a console or computer kid?
I'd say probably more a console kid, but I kind of jump between the two. Like the Commodore 64 was a big computer in our house for a long time, until eventually we got a Super NES and a Game Boy in the house.
Were there any titles that stood out for you on the C64?
Big ones that I remember having a big effect on me were it was EXO. It was kind of it was basically R-Type, but it was kind of underwater. Myst or Myth. That was pretty awesome. Then there was like the whole Barbarian series, because that was pretty hardcore for kids to be kind of playing. where you could decapitate other people. And there was kind of an old sort of wireframe polygon 3D game called Mercenary, where you have kind of spaceships and fly around, like just kind of very basic environment of like blue sky, green ground, and wireframe for things. I had no idea what was going on in the game. I say if I played it now, I still wouldn't. But I used to keep me enwrapped for hours and hours, just wandering around this place.
And was that aesthetic like really appealing when you were a kid as well?
I'd say it was, yeah. I think kind of like the wireframe kind of sort of made it feel like kind of very futuristic and very sci-fi. Like, because a lot of like old sci-fi movies kind of used to have those kind of readouts, those sort of visuals, and never they're kind of showing anything kind of that was sort of 3D and computer like. So maybe I kind of got lost in that a bit. But I think I was always more into the sprite stuff though, because just a lot more at that level at that time. It was a lot more. It conveyed the reality of what you wanted it to be, more like a character, look like a character, rather than a green and white wireframe.
So when was the point that you started getting into adventure games specifically?
My first, like, I had played like some of them on some buddies' computers, like Zack McCracken and stuff like that. They're my friends, like, who had like Atari STs and Amigas. So I was kind of aware of them, but I never really got to fully enjoy them. And the first time I properly experienced an adventure game was actually on the PlayStation 1 when I played what's it called, Broken Sword. Like, my mind was blown because I had that level of fidelity, the visuals that they had. Like, even to this day, Broken Sword 1 looks amazing. But to play that and have all the fantastic audio that kind of the CD allowed was brilliant. And kind of when I got into that, then I got my hands on the PC, and then I started, kind of traveling backwards in time and finding all the adventure games that I wanted to play.
Yeah, you're right, because Broken Sword at the time, there was nothing else that was like it, especially with the level of detail in the cartoons.
Yeah, for sure. I actually went to the college where the guy done the background art went to, or he was a teacher at it, whose name escapes me right now, but in Ballyfermot College in Dublin.
No.
Like, they reached out to him and who done all the backgrounds for it, like, because there was a Don Bluth was an animation studio that used to be in Ireland, and when that company disbanded, a lot of the teachers, so a lot of the staff went off to become teachers in Ballyfermot College. So that's why I had that classic animation look. Like, they literally had classical animators drawing those backgrounds. I feel terrible now, I can't remember the guy's name, but I years later had gone to that college. Just coincidentally, I didn't know until like even after I finished college that the guy who done Broken Sword had gone to that college.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, when you started going back and checking out like the back catalogue of adventure games, which ones really captured your imagination?
So, like, obviously the LucasArts stuff, like all the Monkey Islands and all, like they will stand out. I think that's kind of like the boilerplate answer for most people. But the stuff that really, really stood out to me were kind of the more sort of adult and serious ones. Like The Dig had a really big effect on me. Beneath Steel Sky as well. Like, both of them, I loved that they kind of had that very serious approach to kind of sci-fi. Like, rather than, like, it wasn't just like invading aliens and blow up things like a lot of video games were at the time. It kind of took that pace that like kind of like classic movies like Blade Runner took. Just kind of let you explore the world, let you find characters, let you find discover the mystery. Like, I was really blown away by that. Actually, the old Blade Runner game itself actually was one of them that I really loved. So I have that big box here somewhere in my house right now. That was a particularly fantastic game. I loved how it rolled the dice at the start of the game, and it kind of it set who were replicants and who weren't. So every playthrough was genuinely a different experience to a certain level.
Well, you mentioned The Dig in there as well. I mean, that's something else that we talked about in this podcast. That was kind of a Steven Spielberg movie that was kind of made into a video game, wasn't it? That was quite special. What was it about that game that you liked in particular?
Well, actually, I think specifically that the fact that it was meant to be a movie script always kind of was fascinating to me. Like, because I think probably it opened my imagination a lot with it, kind of imagine how it could have been as a movie, like see how that's how that world would have been presented in a movie back then. But I really liked that kind of the bizarre, like, transported across the galaxy. Kind of had that the Arthur C. Clarke kind of feel to it, like kind of Rendezvous with Rama, kind of very bizarre, far removed kind of world from ours. So I just felt like it leaned very well into sort of classic fiction sci-fi. like literary sci-fi, more so than sort of action sci-fi. I think that's what particularly gripped me.
Well, how did you get into the industry, and what was the industry like in Ireland? Because we don't really hear much about the computer games industry in Ireland, but we know there's a lot of good games coming from there.
Well, the industry here is very, very small. It's like we're decades behind where you guys are in the UK. We have all the same technology, but there's just not a lot of us. We're still building up the studios. Like when I started years ago, it was like I got into video games about 2005, I think. That was around the time when the old Java mobile phones, like the old Nokia 3210s and all that, started to have video games on them, and that kind of like low bar kind of allowed a lot of people to kind of start like becoming sort of bedroom coders, like kind of classic 1980s kind of the British scene. So a lot of small studios started to form out of some early successes there. And there was a studio in Galway where I still live today that was called Neffin Games, and they just needed a pixel artist. Now, I'd studied to be a 3D artist, and all the studio jobs in Ireland that required 3D artists were already filled. Then I heard that the studio in Galway were looking for a pixel artist. So overnight, I faked the pixel art portfolio. I literally just found out like what's the basic tools and how to do pixel art, and mocked up about 6 or 7 different screenshots of video games, and sent that in, trying to get in the door. Luckily, that they didn't spot how bad it was, and they accepted me into the role.
Galway seems to be a little kind of centre for it at the moment. I went to visit Romero Studios there, and there was a few guys in the pubs hanging around that were responsible for the Ghost Recon games and stuff. So it seems to be a little kind of centre in Ireland. Yeah,
so I've been here probably about 14 years in Galway, and like just when I first moved here, there was no scene, and the company I moved here to work with, like they collapsed after 2 years. So I freelanced for many years, but then we started to kind of build a community up. Started to kind of get people meeting each other in the local pub, of course, and we started to discover that there was a lot of developers around, and like nobody was connected. So we kind of done our best to kind of start networking the community together, and out of that, my own company formed from the basis of that. The Romero Games, like John and Brenda, like I know them both very well. I helped them move here when they were looking to move here. And I used to actually share an office with them for about a year. But they found that they were doing a tour of Ireland as part of Brenda's Fulbright Fellowship, where she was kind of reviewing the size and issues with the scene here in Ireland. And I invited her to Galway to do a talk while she was here. And when her and John landed in Galway, they really liked it. They just found it was a good, vibrant place. So they moved here, set up studio, and they've about 20 odd people working for them now.
It must have been inspirational working with them as well.
It was, yeah. I got to work with them on a game. They made a game that their son designed. He was 12 at the time. It's called a Gunman Taco Truck, and they wanted to do it as pixel art. And I'm kind of one like the most well-known pixel artists in Ireland, and I knew them as well at the time, so it kind of got me involved. And it was fun. It was an interesting project to kind of translate in a young gamer's imagination into graphics. And also trying to make it look like how I kind of remembered old games to look like. So kind of, if you look at it, it's very flat in the design. It's kind of like trying to ape what old games look like more so than be what old games look like.
I know old games back then, you often used like D-Paint on the Amiga was like an industry standard back in the early 90s. What kind of software were you using then to do this pixel art?
I usually jump between a piece of software called Graphic Scale and Photoshop. In fact, I probably use Photoshop more than anything now, just because I just find it more flexible for everything. Limiting the colors and all those kind of necessary kind of evils from years ago, they're not really there now. So I can kind of stretch things a little further now. So you can set Photoshop up very easy for making pixel graphics these days.
Well, you worked on titles like The Sims and Theme Park as well. So what was your involvement there?
So when I was freelancing, there was one company I used to work quite a lot out of Denmark called Progressive Media, and they were doing a lot of work for hire for EA and other big studios at the time. So I got drafted in with them to work on Theme Park and The Sims. The Sims game was an old Nokia game or old Java phone game. So very limited sort of isometric pixel art style. And yeah, it was just interesting to play with the big brand to kind of bring all those sort of things, like those little iconic jewels above their heads, and sort of fit them into sort of pixel art world. And also, like, you're launching it, and there's millions of people playing that game. Theme park was a lot of fun as well. I kind of got to stretch my 3D legs a bit there. And because it was during the iPad smartphone era, like I was able to kind of really kind of push my art rather than sort of be so restricted that the old Java phones used to restrict you by. Yeah, it was cool. I got to work on like lots of cute art, and then it was a big game. It launched, and lots of people were talking about it when it came out.
So you've worked on over 100 games, which is a massive amount. Are there any like highlights or any kind of funny situations that have arose from that?
I've worked on a lot of games. From people in the Middle East to people in all over the world, North America, Australia. I think I worked on a couple of games for people in South America. Yeah, it's good. I mean, if you go back through my catalog, if you could find all of them, you'll probably find there's always like an avatar of me somewhere hiding in the games. I always like to I'd be bored working on the game, so I try to fit myself in somewhere. Highlights. I worked on an old adventure game years ago called Mystery Mania. That was an EA game as well, actually. It was kind of this sort of vector art styled game about like this little robot lost in a mansion, wandering around trying to solve puzzles in each room to kind of find its lost memory. That was a really nice game to work on. I think I worked on that for about a year. It was it kept me employed for a long time, but it was also just a lovely, very pleasant project to work on. Another game I worked on, which was very successful, was a game called Leps World. It's for an Austrian company called Nearby. Basically, it's Super Mario, but on mobile phone. And it was the first game I'd done that went mega huge for a small company. It's like the series has been downloaded about like 200 million times. Like, it's really big success for the company. Like, and I'd worked on really serious art house games and all throughout the years, and that was the first one that I had. Like, I'd be meeting people, and I'd normally, if they found out I worked on games, they'd ask what you work on, and if I'd rattle off a few of them, they'd never hear of it. But as soon as I mentioned Leps World, they knew it. Their kids knew it. I design autographs for kids because they like Leps World so much.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we look back at those kind of, the early kind of smartphones, like the Nokia phones and the Java phones you mentioned as well. And we kind of, laugh a bit at them now, but they really did start a whole industry there, didn't they? It was kind of the rebirth of the indie scene, I guess.
I think so, yeah. It lowered the barrier for entry for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people were able to cut their teeth making games and kind of reaching an audience when you just couldn't before. Particularly the Java phone days, where they were probably more friendly to programmers than they were artists back then. But the people didn't really make tons of money off it because like the way the platform holders, like say for example you were selling your game on a Vodafone store, they'd sell the game for $5 and you'd make 20 cents off it or something like that. It was ridiculous, the amount of money they took from it. But then as soon as Apple opened up the App Store, that changed everything. That the floodgates opened then for indie developers. The 70-30 model, where like the developer gets 70% and the publisher and platform holder gets 30%. Like, Apple pioneered that. Steam changed to match that. Pretty much every platform has matched that. Like, that made like overnight millionaires out of a lot of indie developers.
I guess with Java, you made one version and it got pumped out to everything rather than making an Android version or an iPhone version or an iPad version.
Oh, quite the opposite, actually. Yeah, like, so every phone back then had a different flavor of running Java. Each one had a different resolution. Each handset just had different things. Like, so if I made an iPhone game now, I got to make it work on 6 models of iPhone and an iPad. You make it work on Android, you got to make it work in a couple of flavors of Android, and there's always going to be bugs across Android because there is so many SKUs of it. But with the Java days, like, sometimes you have to make like 300 separate versions of a game just to work on all the handsets.
Wow! So it wasn't scalable at all.
No, like they couldn't do anything. Like, the technology of the phones, like the apps, like, were so small you couldn't they couldn't in real time scale art down. So like, sometimes I'd be working on a screen that might be 128 by 128 pixels, and then the next version of it might be like say 200 by 150 or so. Like, so I'd have to completely redraw the art bigger to kind of fit the canvas. So like it was heartbreaking sometimes because you start off with like really nice art, and then by the time you get them all the lowest level versions of the phones, you've already crunched all the colors out of your graphics, scaled them down by half, had to redraw them to the point that like an interesting sort of like Street Fighter 2 sort of style character looks like a stick man at the very end. Like, so it was grueling, but it taught me how to how to work economically.
So when we were all playing on our N gauges back in the day, we had no idea the amount of work that went into those games.
Yeah, I like the N gauge despite its massive flaws.
I've actually been tempted to get one recently off eBay. Yeah.
The King of Fighters on it was great. Like the frame rate was terrible and all that, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. It didn't work as a phone, but the games worked on it.
Yeah, it felt stupid holding that to your ear walking down the street.
Yeah, it was pretty bad, all right.
And it was amazing how people would just accept, like, they'd be playing really nice games on their 16-bit machine at home or 32-bit, and then they'd get to their phone and it'd be Snake, and they're, like, totally accepting of that. It's fine, because I can play on the move, you know?
Yeah, but then the N-Gage came along, and they didn't accept the compromises you had to make to kind of get that sort of a console inverted commas experience on a phone.
Well, we've talked a bit about like the games that influenced you growing up, and particularly those early arcade titles. But really, I mean, it seems like adventure games, in particular point-and-click adventure games, have kind of become your main thing. I mean, what is it about the point-and-click genre that you like so much?
I think it complements the three of us as a team at the moment really well. I think that's probably one of the main focuses of why we work in adventure games. It's like adventure games have a very, compared to the rest of the games industry, they have a relatively small audience. So you're never going to make a big out of an adventure game. Like even Thimbleweed Park hasn't broken like 100,000 copies sold around that. But like we really like I liked the way the audience embraces pixel art so willingly. I like that dials the speed of an experience back down. Like we all really like the fact that like violence isn't really part of it. Like don't get me wrong, I love my shooters and I love my love my sort of action adventure games, but I do also like kind of finding like an alternative route in video games. And with adventure games, you generally you don't solve a situation with a gun, you solve it with a rubber chicken and a piece of string. As well as that, like game kind of came around as a bit of an accident, but it kind of grew really well because of just of the team that came together. Like the initial 4-screen demo that kind of kicked it off, like came together in a game jam. Myself and a buddy made it in about 8 hours. It was this terrible little demo that like really didn't make sense. The puzzle didn't particularly work at the end of it, but we kind of nailed a bit of character, and our audience or the people online when we posted it like really sort of liked what we were doing and liked the demo. But then we got a really good writer working with us, Dave McCabe, and he helped turn it around. Like his sense of humor, his writing style, his design skills came across so well into it, and it really complemented what we were doing. And Tracy came on board to be the coder as well, and she's found like nice, interesting ways to kind of streamline the whole development experience for us. And the way we've designed Darkside as well, by stripping back a lot of like how adventure games work, by removing movement, by removing dialogue, made it very quick fire. Removing voiceover and made kind of the dialogue very quick fire. It's been a very sort of quick and easy experience for us developing. Like, so for a small team working in our spare time, it really suited us.
Well, we are talking about the Darkside Detective. So where did kind of the story come from, and what was it? Did you have like any influences? Was it based on any kind of older games?
Well, the main influences for it come from like 80s and 90s pop culture. I mean, the game, the first half of the game definitely leans on like sort of references, and it kind of eventually kind of grows more into its own thing as you play through it. Like when we were making it, we just kind of wanted to make something that was kind of spooky and occulty, and sort of feels like the X-Files meets Twin Peaks. That's kind of where its initial sort of premise came from. I think we learned the kind of jokes and world we wanted to make from like old movies and TV, and even British TV, British comedies like Blackadder and stuff like that kind of those character dynamics. But then we kind of learned how to deliver the punchlines and how to kind of design that experience. Like that was all influenced from older point and clicks.
So why did you decide to go with the like retro style, low resolution pixel graphics for it then, rather than like some high definition graphics?
That kind of came about because it was born in the game jam. When we were running the game jam, we had very little time to make the game. So quite literally, I just said, right, let's work with a really small base resolution. I think like it's like it started out as like 140 pixels by 90 pixels, really small like that. And then I scaled it up and started adding these kind of HD color effects over the really basic pixel art. And I kind of sort of landed in this sort of very comfortable zone of being 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the present. And it kind of added a sort of a layer of like polish to kind of an otherwise basic experience. And when we put that online, we just got this really positive reaction to it. People like really liked what they were doing. People saw the old games in it, but still felt like they were getting a modern experience. So it's like genuinely that's where it came from. And the art has evolved somewhat throughout the years as we worked on it. Like we've really worked with the balance of our color palette to make it a lot more subtle. Really learned how to play with the space on screen. But like genuinely, the low resolution style comes from literally having no time to work on it when we're making the demo.
Have you took inspiration from any other artists or sources or anything?
I think Mark Ferrari was a big inspiration on me. Basically, more so in terms of like some things he teaches or some of his ideas about how art works rather than copying his style or anything like that. So Mark Ferrari, like he was like one of the main artists at LucasArts for a long time. He'd done like Monkey Islands and like a lot of games. But he's like certain practices he took. Like like a very good example is like in one of the talks he gave, he said you always color the sky of a scene first, so you let that color of the sky influence the color of the rest of the scene, and you see that in Darkside, like the color of the main background area or sky will always influence the general overall color of the scene.
Would you prefer 2D or 3D graphics?
What I do like is I like quick graphics. I like to turn things out quickly. I don't like to get bored with something. So like when you work on 100 games like I've done, it's usually because you're doing quick turnover. Like I've learned how to like shortcuts through my career, how to work fast. Usually I'd like to be able to, whatever asset I'm working on, I like to be able to get it done in an hour or two rather than spend a lot of time on it. 3D graphics can tend to be more laborious because of the multiple stages of it, like in terms of like building it, unwrapping it, texturing it. And that's only on the basic level. There's much more advanced stages on it. So I'd say with that in mind, I'd probably prefer 2D. With 3D, I do like kind of low res styles in 3D because you can get very interesting and very stylized art done very quickly if you just sort of focus on the right things.
Was it a bit of a risk kind of doing retro style point and click adventure these days?
Yes, it is. I mean, if we made it like right now we started a new adventure game, we'd have to really question if we wanted to go to a retro style. One of the benefits we had with the Darkside Detective style was it was so simple to work with that we could do quick turnout of graphics to kind of keep the game interesting online while we were developing it. So like whenever an event was happening, like Donut Day, or when the Face app was very popular, like we were able to do jokes about that by getting graphics out really quickly. So like the simple style benefited us now, but there's a bit of pixel art backlash these days. A lot of the audience is a little bit jaded with it. So just because you're making the classic art style doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get appreciated for it.
Do you think it's been a bit of an overkill? Is that why?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, I think we're doing it for the right reasons ourselves. It suits what we're doing, but it shouldn't be your automatic choice to do art as pixel art unless it's really is the right choice for your game.
Well, what kind of challenges did you encounter when making the game?
Designing the game was a big one. Like the game has gone through several iterations of design. So I don't know if your listeners have played it or not, but the game is broken up into these 6 sort of mini investigations or 9 investigations when you open the bonus cases. And so they're all like these sort of small, tidy little experiences. The problem is that like when we design them on paper, and it usually comes from an idea of like, here's a situation we think we'd like them in, here's a location we'd like them in. We build it out from that. Like Dave and Tracy do most of the design, so they'll go off, come up with a loose script. If we all like it, then they'll design out a white boxed version of it to find out like the general sort of puzzles, and then we'll build it like in the most basic way, and then we'll play it, and then usually we'll find that it's terrible and have to sort of tinker around, push bits around, try to remove the tedium, because one of Darkside's main design tenets was that it had to be a very streamlined experience. So we didn't want any tediousness in there. We wanted it all to be very quick. We wanted a sort of the casual point and click experience. So same amount of content as any other adventure game, but you're just going to get it quicker. So then we'd with that in mind, we'd find like, sometimes it take too many clicks to get around, or it might just take that a little bit too long to find a solution to a puzzle, and it just sort of adds to the boredom. So like there's been many times you kind of got to this sort of white box stage, redesigned it, and if we couldn't find a solution, the whole idea would be scrapped. If we found a solution, we'd flesh it out more, find other problems, then have to sort of retinker again and again just to kind of keep the flow going.
Well, I guess the fact that you were such a fan of those, original point-and-click games back in the day probably meant that you kind of saw design elements of those games that you didn't like or didn't really work and could improve on those.
I think the difference is relevance. See, back when we first got original adventure games, it was like you'd probably get the game and you wouldn't have another game for several months. You might literally have that game sitting there for 6 months. So you had the time to invest in it and discover it. And you didn't have the internet to go off and find a solution. You might have to go talk to your buddies who are playing it, or you might eventually find some sort of portion of a walkthrough in a magazine. But like you had the time to invest in it. That like a single game experience probably meant more back like in the 80s and 90s than it does now. These days, a video game is a lot more disposable. Where if you don't like the game, you'll quickly go online, find a walkthrough, or if you don't want to do that, you might just find something else that you have queued in Steam, of like that you got in a bundle there recently. Our design philosophy was that we wanted you to be able to drop in, drop out a game as often as possible, and it wasn't something that if you could get bored with too quickly and then drop. So like even breaking up the story into 6 separate little stories, that was part of that. Is you play the game, you get a win, you're able to solve the case within an hour, and then you're able to put the game down for 2 weeks and you pick it up again, and you don't have to remember why you have a monkey wrench or why do you have a ball of rubber bands or something like that. Like you just, it's a fresh experience. Then you're able to sit down, have a win, and put it down. Now, what we discovered is that most people like to play it straight through. Like people would clear the game in a night or two. But we've had a lot of users who've spent several weeks playing it. Like we've a lot of people who've played it with their kids, who played one case a night with their kids. Like they got to really enjoy it, like sharing the experience. It was kind of like the bedtime story was to solve a Darkside case.
So were you pleased with the reaction when the game came out?
We were, yeah. It's when we launched the game, the very first, the minute the game launched, the first review that landed as soon as the embargo was over was from Destructoid. So a very big site, a very respected website, and they hated the game. They gave us like a 5.5 out of 10, and the reviewer literally just I think he hated us as much as he hated the game. He had complete disdain for everything. Like even his review had all the names of the areas and characters in the game wrong. He just despised it, and it broke our heart. We thought oh no, we spent 2 years making this game, and here it is. Like every review is going to come out, and everybody's going to hate it. And but then we spent a lot of time building up an audience online, so we had a lot of people waiting for the game to come out. So over the next 24 hours, all these other reviews started coming out. We started getting like 7, 8s, and 9s out of 10. Started getting these really positive kind of reviews. Started getting lots of user reviews. I think we've like the 400 plus reviews on Steam. Lots of people tweeting at us. Like lots of people really, really liked what we'd done. Like so, we went from like this pit of despair to like suddenly being elated that our audience weren't let down. And genuinely, like we were such a great audience. Like our Discord is full of such nice people. Like we adventure games don't sort of don't attract kind of like the gamer bro sort of culture. Like it's genuinely just really nice people. Everyone sort of is more homely and pleasant, I suppose you could say. As well as that, one of the core parts of our game is just a friendship with the two characters. Like one's an idiot and one's the more savvy detective, but at the core of it, like they're two people who care about each other, and they've grown up together. And people really responded to that. Like sort of a wholesome thing that we put in there that might make the game seem nerdy was actually a really positive thing for our audience. So people took to what we were doing really well.
Well, it does seem in recent years that point-and-click games have had a resurgence recently. Why do you think that is?
I just there's many reasons for that. Like there's lots of different opinions. Number one is that adventure games never really did die. There was always some audience there for it. It's just like the driving force of the industry moved ahead. So there was just people still there playing adventure games in the background and making them. But then you have like Dave Gilbert from Wadget. Like he kind of like held the torch for a long time making games in the background. Like he discovered the audience was there. I think another one is that there's a lot of people now have. It's also like a lot of people hitting their 30s and their 40s. So people who played adventure games in the 90s as kids have gotten like all the action adventure stuff out of their system and are now just slowing down and are having more relaxed evenings in rather than wanting to like, go online and play competitively. Like they're kind of rediscovering kind of a more gentler or considered experience.
Yeah, I think you're right there as well, because it's kind of like rediscovering an old friend, isn't it, when you go back to the point and click adventure games?
It is. It's like when you read fantasy novels. Every one of them has the wizards and orcs and elves, but it's kind of like slipping into a comfortable pair of old shoes. Like you just kind of it feels right.
And it's kind of like a personal experience. And as you mentioned with online, that's a big multiplayer experience, and kind of going from that, you lose all the pressure and you can do it at your own pace.
Oh, for sure. And it's a very shareable experience as well. Like you can play an adventure game with people because like it's not about who has control of it. It's about like thinking about what to do next. So like a lot of couples play adventure games together these days. So I think that's one of those sort of things. It's an easily shared experience. Just sit back on the couch if it's on a console, or play on a laptop and just like sort of cuddling together and just kind of try and figure out the solution among yourselves.
Well, do you think Thimbleweed Park was a good vote of confidence in the genre? Because that obviously got a lot of press, didn't it, and attention?
Yeah, I think even Tim Schafer's Broken Age, that was called. Yeah, like that was the mega beacon sort of to say like these games are cool. And I think Thimbleweed Park saying they're cool, but they can be old school as well was a major factor. If it wasn't for Thimbleweed Park, I don't know whether we would have had half the success we've had, because we had people rediscovering the genre, but also being able to kind of revisit the more retro aspects of the genre.
And that humour that was in there, that was like, classic Ron Gilbert.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And, the one thing about adventure games for a long time is that, like, for example, a lot of the Wadget games are very serious. So not a lot of adventure games tend to be very funny. And I think that was something that was missing from the genre for a long time. So I think Thimbleweed coming back with humour was a big one. And it also helped us as well, because, we have a very funny writer. And our game isn't essentially sort of selling like a big experience, but it's selling a very humoursome.
Well, what aspects of the Darkside Detective are you most proud of?
I really like what we did with the streamlining of the design. I know it's not for everybody. Some people still believe the character should walk around, but like we kind of got annoyed by games like where you click on something and the character has to kind of donder across the screen for like 3 seconds to eventually tell you that it's just a lamp. Like being able to just kind of just pull it out. In fact, like Dave Gilbert at Wadget Eye's Unavowed has kind of introduced sort of similar things to that now, like where the characters don't wander around the scene to look at objects anymore. They actually click and just sort of like discuss what it is. But we pulled all of that back. We kind of wanted to make that sort of quick fire experience, almost make it feel like when you're reading a comic where your eyes are just sort of jumping across the panels really quickly. It kind of feels like that to me. Also, being able to make it casual and sort of fit more into your lives. I don't know what age you guys are, but like I'm in my late 30s, like, and I don't have the time to play as much video games as I used to. So being able to develop an experience that's kind of designed to fit into time-starved adults' lives is kind of rewarding, because I only get to play games after I get my son to bed in the evening, or maybe on the commute or something like that. So designing to that philosophy of like streamlining the experience and making it that fits more easily into an adult's life was kind of a big factor for us, and I think we've done well. I think we've been rewarded for it.
Yeah, I think the days of playing 18 hours worth of games on a Saturday or in the summer holidays are long gone for a lot of us, aren't they?
I'd be looking to get 18 minutes.
Yeah. Well, when the show comes out on Friday morning, your Kickstarter actually ends today. So, I mean, there might still be time for people to get involved if you listen to the show nice and early. And the Darkside Detective Season 2 as well is the thing you've got on Kickstarter right now. So what's going to be new in this then? What's the aim of this one?
The aim of it is to, ultimately, number one, bring back the characters. The format we kind of followed with like the broken up cases fits really well with like the sort of the TV episode kind of monster of the week thing that we've kind of worked into the game. So like TV series, there tends to be a series 1 and a series 2. So we thought like, yeah, we could make more Darkside, and we had an audience that seemed to want it. Also, like we've gotten better at designing the cases. So all of the failings that we personally see in season 1, we want to sort of just be able to sort of build that stronger, much more cohesive experience in season 2. We have kind of a loose arc in mind for season 2. Like we've always had this sort of 3-season arc in mind and had this kind of loose sort of story that goes through all of them. And small elements have been alluded to it in season 1 already. But so we want to kind of continue that and try and fill in that kind of part of the story.
Well, are there any old kind of retro games that you play yourself?
It's still now to this day.
Yeah. Just one or something that you go back to. Yeah,
I think one game I go back to regularly, which I think has been one of the most inspiring games for my whole life, has been Another World. For me, like for a lot of video game art is finding the art and the limitation. And Eric Shahi at the time, he made a game which worked at the limitations of the technology, but it still stands out as a very striking piece of visual art now, just because he chose the right colors and the right visual style by finding the limitations of the technology at the time. And that still means a lot to me. Like I have a big poster over here in my office, the image of the lead character standing on the cliff, and I just love how much he achieved there, and I love that sense of place it has. So I think like at least once a year, like I might install it and play it for a bit. I'm also like, I like going back to classic shooters like Doom and Quake, which are always something you can just drop in and drop out of, like without any sort of without any thought or whatever like that. Well, I think games like Another World kind of sit more in my imagination.
Yeah, Another World's like on everything as well, isn't it? I got it on the Nintendo Switch a couple of weeks ago, and I went to visit my family, and my brother and I were sitting up till about 3 a.m, just trying to do that bit, where you need to burst the water, then jump over those little bits. We must have retried it about 50 times until we eventually cracked it.
It's cruel. Like that's it. Even that's one of those things. Like even with Darkside Detective, like we have designed the game to work for a modern audience, because like games back then were grueling. Like when you were a child playing it, it was possible to like spend 20 hours getting past the water part.
Yeah.
And it was the only game you had. So like, what else were you gonna do? But these days, like, it's just, you'd be like, oh, screw that, I'm going to load up another game. But, I've played the game so much, I think I just have to have those sort of things down as nearly reflex memory at this point. But yeah, the old games were not kind.
Well, Paul, if people want to read more about your experiences, you are actually a contributor to the Art of Point-and-Click Adventure Games book.
Yeah, it was really nice. Like Sam Dyer, who runs Bitmap Books, he's a really nice guy, and I hadn't met him before or spoken to him before the book was in development, but just kind of one of those sort of timely things where like we launched Darkside and kind of became like a relatively well-known adventure game was about the time when he was starting to work on the book. So he reached out to us and asked if we wouldn't mind having the game featured in the section about modern adventure games. So it was really nice kind of doing up an interview. He had some interesting questions about the artistic process and just adventure games in general. And it's a pleasure to see in the book, just seeing your art in the book. And I was asked myself personally to do the artwork for the special edition cover, the collector's edition cover.
Oh, nice.
Which was really nice. Yeah, like he had a plan of what he wanted, and but like it's really charming being able to kind of turn pixel art into printed graphics.
Well, if people want to check out the book, they can either win or buy a copy on our website, theretrohour.com. Paul, good luck with Darkside Detective Series 2.
Thank you very much.
And if people want to get your games and find out more, do you have a website or anything they can go to?
Best place to go right now is the Darkside Detective, darksidedetective.com. Or else you can find us on Twitter at ds_detective, or just Darkside Detective on Facebook.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on this week, Paul. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much, guys. See ya.
Cheers.
And thank you for checking out this week's episode of the Retro Hour podcast as we do Adventure Month with the Art of Point and Click Adventure Games, the new wonderful book from our friends at Bitmap Books. And if you head to theretrohour.com this week, you can get a look at this book, also have a chance to buy it or enter our exclusive competition to win a signed copy of the book, signed by creative director and founder of Bitmap Books, Sam Dyer. And we'll see you next Friday.